All right, hey guys, and welcome to the quick start. So this is just for anyone who doesn't really know anything about Maya, and I just thought it would make the course a little bit more accessible for everyone. So this is Maya. Maybe you've never even opened it before, but this is what it looks like. This is your perspective view, it's called. So in this view, you can actually rotate the camera around. You can zoom in and out. It's basically like the 3D space that you can move around in. And this is your grid here. And this is where you can make all of the shapes that you would model. So we'll get into that in a minute. So basically to rotate the camera, all you do is hold down the Alt key and then you hold down left click and it brings up, you'll see that little rotate thing. And then you can just move your mouse around and you can just keep holding Alt and let go of the mouse and just keep clicking and dragging the mouse basically, and that will rotate the camera for you. You can go in any direction that you like. The other thing that I use a lot is holding down Alt, and then if you hold down the right click, it brings up the little zoom thing. So you can know what that's going to do. Basically, you drag to the right and it zooms in, you drag to the left, and it zooms out. Now, if we want to instead pan the camera, we can hold Alt and then just click in your wheel, the middle wheel button, and that just brings up the pan option. So that's just going to allow you to travel kind of almost like strafing, I guess, like in a video game, if you want to go around a corner really good. Same type of thing. So that covers the camera movement for us. So that's all you need to know there. Now, the next thing about cameras is there's actually 3 more cameras that are useful to use when you're modeling. So again, this is your perspective camera. Now, if I press space anywheres in this window, that's going to bring up this 4 view thing. If it doesn't do that, you might be in some different mode of Maya. So it might bring up like a 2-pane window. If it does something different than this, all you have to do is go to the left and you'll see this little 4 window one here. If you just click that, it just resets it back to this. So if I click that one, it's just your perspective. You can click that one, it's a 4, that's a 2. So if you want to get to the 4 one, just click that. And that's the one I always use since the beginning of learning this stuff. So it's useful. So we have the perspective view up here. Now, if I want to go back into that view, all you do is put your mouse over top of anywheres in this window here, and you just press space. And that just expands it larger. So now it's almost like you're in that window. So then to come back out, you just space. Then you hover over whatever other view you'd like to go into. So sometimes you don't even need to go into them. You can just do the work in the 4 view and leave it like this. But if you want to make this bigger, say we want to go into the front view, we'll just press space. And then now we're in the front view. So while we're in these cameras, these are called orthographic cameras. So they're basically only one perspective, and that's going to be very flat. Like there's no perspective on it. So it's called orthographic view. If we want to move around in here, we can basically just pan or zoom. So hold Alt, and then you can use the middle wheel, same as before, to pan the camera or strafe, whichever. And then if you want to zoom, same thing, you just hold Alt and then use the right click option and right click and drag one way or the other. So that should cover it for the cameras. If you can't see, so this is your top view here. This is your front and this is your side. Okay, so I'm quickly going to make a shape. Don't worry about how I do this right now. We're going to make a shape. And I'll just show you, if I click that shape, the top of this shape, so this face here, is actually, it's as if we're like looking down like this. So that's the top view. And then the front is as if you're looking down this way with the blue arrow. So you're looking towards it this way. So this is pretty much the same as this. And then the side is just looking at it through X here. Okay. So just so you understand that whatever you create here also is in these cameras. We're all looking at the same thing, just from a different view, essentially. So that does it for the cameras. Okay, let's get into some objects and just definitions of that stuff. So I'll hold Shift, hold right click, go down to Cube and release the right click mouse button. And that's going to create what's called an object. So any shape in Maya is basically called an object. And objects are made up of other things. So this object it's the same as geometry class basically in school. So this is a cube object. Now it has components, and to get into that component mode, all you do is hover over the object. So right now we're in object mode. You can tell because it's got the green wireframe on it. If I hold right click over top of this shape, that's going to say edge mode, object mode, vertex, or face mode. Those are the only ones you really need to worry about. So if we go up to edge mode, that's going to allow us to select the edges, and you can see that they'll turn red when you hover over them. And if you want to select them, you just left click and that selects the edge. If you want to select multiple edges, you can hold down Shift and you can just click. Keep holding Shift and just click the ones you want to add to your selection. You can also drag a box around the ones you'd want to add to your selection. Now, if I'm still holding Shift and I drag a box around something that is selected, it deselects it. Okay, so it does the opposite action to whatever it's already. If it's selected, you drag a box around it, it deselects it. If it's not selected, you drag a box around it, selects it. Now, let's say I want to easily select, let's say this edge was a little harder to select than it is. And I just want to be able to drag a box around this whole thing and add that to my selection without deselecting like that. All I have to do then is press Control and Shift at the same time, hold them down, click and drag with my left mouse button, and then that adds everything in the selection to my current selection, which is kind of cool. Now, if I want to deselect everything like that as well, whether or not it's, let's say some of these aren't selected and I want to deselect all of them, then all I do is hold Control and you can see the little minus appears on the move tool there. Then I drag a box around it and that just deselects it. Okay. Now, if I have a bunch of stuff selected and I don't want to go through and drag a box, I just want to kind of press a hotkey and have it deselect everything in my scene. Then I can just press Alt D and that is going to deselect everything in the scene. Okay, so now back to the object. If I just click it, that's object mode. Now if I hold right click, let's go down to face mode. So these are faces. I can just click a face, same kind of selection ideas apply, holding Shift. If you want to select everything, Control plus Shift, drag a box. It adds everything that you drag over to the current selection. If you want to deselect everything, hold Control, drag a box. And the other one is vertex. So all I'm doing again is holding right click, going to vertex. And when you do that, make sure you're just hovering over the shape itself, like over the actual area of the shape. Hover over that, hold right click, go to vertex mode. And you can see these little points appear. So these are vertices. And same thing goes. You can select them like that, holding Shift or Control plus Shift, drag a box and it selects all of them. So that's the basics of that. Now, so in closing for that, we have objects, we have edges on those objects, we have vertices on those objects, we have faces on those objects, just like that. Okay. Now let's get into the move tool. So this is the move tool, this thing with the arrows that's been kind of standing out right now. If you can't see it, just press W. Now this has some cool functions to it. Basically, each arrow represents moving it in the different axes that I named before. So this is Y, it's green. This is X, it's red. And this is Z, and it's blue. So if we want to move this in Z, we can push it back. All I'm doing is holding down left click and just dragging. So click and drag either way. You want to move it like that. If you want to move it this way, that's the functionality of these arrows, like this, okay? Now you can also use these little things. And what these do is, if you just imagine that this arrow didn't exist. So it's only going to allow you to move it up or down and left or right on those planes if I use this one. I like to just imagine that this little blue plane, it's like a flat plane, is just a giant wall, and that's how you can move it. So I don't know if that's confusing or not, but let's see. So here, let's say I just had a plane. Just imagine that this plane is the only directions you can move the object in. That would be like using this. Okay? So it doesn't move it up or down, which is useful sometimes when you have to move something. Like say I want it to just grab that quickly and move it like that. It's still going to be perfectly lined up with this grid because it's as if we're moving it along a plane, right? Now this one's going to move it along that plane, essentially. So it doesn't matter where you drag it, it's still sticking to that center line. It's kind of nice. So I'll just delete that quickly. So that's the move tool. You can also highlight an arrow. So if I click that arrow, it selects it. And then if I want to, like, say I want to go over here and snap it to this grid point, it knows I only want to move it in this direction. So I can just go click, select it. Then I can hold X, and you can see the little center turns to a circle. That means it's going to be in snap mode. So I'll hold X and then press in my wheel of the mouse and then just wiggle a tiny bit. And what that does is it only moves it in this direction and it snaps it in line with that grid point. See that? As opposed to if I had it here and I click the center, that's going to snap it in all directions to this point. So it'll put that exact center point on this grid point. So I'll hold X and then I'll middle wheel click and wiggle, and see that snaps the center point to that grid point. So I'll just do that quickly one more time. So if I click Z, hold X, middle wheel, click down and wiggle, you see that the height doesn't change here, right? But if I click the center, hold X, go over here and middle mouse wheel down, click and wiggle, then the height changes because it's allowing it to snap in all directions, okay? So that's snapping with that grid snap. I get more into like vertex snapping and stuff in the actual course. I just thought I would touch on that. So that's the move tool functionality. That's all you really need to know about that. Now, if I press E on my keyboard, this is going to be the rotate tool. So you can see we have the 3 different hoops here. If I click, I had the Z one selected. Now I have the X one selected. This is the Y. Okay, so it's all just doing it in that one axis. And all I'm doing, same thing, I'm just left click dragging, okay? Now, if I want to snap rotate, I can hold down the J key while doing that. So if I click, left click down and drag, now you can see it's clicking almost like it's snapping. And that's at increments of, I think, 15 degrees, okay? Which is nice if you want to quickly rotate something and have it end up at 90 degrees or 45. You don't have to worry about it being a little bit off. So that was hold the J key, click and drag the rotate handle that you want to use, and it snap rotates, okay? Now, the other cool thing about this tool, and this is maybe a bit advanced, but this outer ring here is going to allow you to rotate that on the axis of the angle of your camera, okay? So I'll show you kind of what I mean. So I'll go out here. I'm just going to make a new camera. Don't worry about this. Now I'll zoom out, and so this camera is actually, we're looking through this camera with this window now. Don't worry about how I got there. I'm just trying to demonstrate how that rotate thing works. So if I go like this, and let's say I click that in here, and I go to my rotate tool, if I use this one, it's going to rotate this object in a plane like this that lines up perfectly with the camera. So I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so it depends on what angle your camera's at. So if I kind of go more, let's say I'll delete this, and I go more dead on the side here, then it's going to rotate it almost pretty much the same as this Z one. So if I use that, because of the angle of this camera, okay? So that's just a little trick for the future. Maybe that's super confusing. For now, all you need to use are these 3 here. And maybe you'll understand this one more in the future. But I just wanted to show that basically whatever angle your camera's at, if you use this one, it rotates kind of 90 degrees with the view of your camera. So that does it for the rotate tool. Now we can go and press R. So this is our scale tool, and it's pretty much the same as the move, really. So you can just click, scale it in Y, kind of stretches it, scale it in X, and scale it in Z. You can click and drag the middle, and that will do it uniformly. So it'll scale it up the exact same amount in X, Z, and Y. Okay. And then you can use these things, and that's only going to scale it in Y or X. So you can see it's getting taller, it's getting wider, but it's not getting thicker because I'm using this. So now if I go back, and here, let's say this, it's not going to get taller. It's just going to get wider and thicker. Okay. Now the thing with this too is, So I'll just undo. And then this one, it's only going to scale it in Y or Z, so it's going to get taller and thicker. See? So that's the scale tool. Now, one other really cool thing with Maya is that if you do select the arrow, let's say you select the arrow, some people think that you have to actually left click and drag on the arrow itself, which, yeah, that works. But if I want to just select the arrow, I can actually put my mouse over here and use the middle wheel and click down, and I can move it like that. So clicking down the middle wheel and dragging, if you have the handle highlighted, like selected. And that's actually really useful because I can just really simply click like this, and I can zoom right in on something. And instead of being like, have to put my mouse like that, I can go out here and just like really gently kind of do that. And I don't know, I just find it's a little different. It's a little easier to kind of focus on what is moving when your mouse is like out of the way. That's just a personal preference. But I really like that feature, and I miss it in other software. There's some other software that doesn't have it really, and I miss it. So it's pretty cool. Same with here. If you highlight that, you can just use the wheel anywhere. Like you can put your mouse anywhere and move stuff around. You don't have to go like that. One last little tip here when you're actually having a scene full of objects. So I'll quickly make a couple more. Your camera is going to get kind of weird. Sometimes if you're like, let's say I want to rotate perfectly around this object, and it's almost like the camera's like trying to rotate around a point out here. It's kind of annoying, and you zoom in and you're trying to like work on this space here and rotate around that. Basically what you can do is called focus. So you can click on any object or component, which I'll show you in a second. Just click it, highlight it, press the F key, and that's going to just focus your camera on that wherever this point is, wherever your selection point is. So then when I rotate around, it's nice and centered. Now I can also, like I was saying, I can do that with any component as well. So I can, if I go to face mode on this, I want to zoom in on the center of this face, press F. There we go. Now it's going to rotate around this selection point here. And same with like vertices too. So I'll just show you. Just like that. So it's pretty awesome. So that does it for the quick start, and that's pretty much all you need to know. And the rest I'm going to just step by step show you as we go through the modeling process for the robot head. So I'll see you at the next one.